The Walking Dead has undergone a ton of changes from showrunners, the writers, and even the cast themselves. Adaptation of the Walking Dead source material cannot be faithful to its source in every respect, because adaptations, by their nature, include departures.
Fresh changes the show introduces to its representation impacts its genre and character changes through its runtime, from 2010 to 2022.
I'll explain to you why the show goes through so much change in this video. Changes of the show's image is what made fans depart from the show, but the new adaptations of comic book content to the silver screen made fans stay due to the fresh representations of plot and characters. Of course, this caused inconsistencies as it differed slightly away from the source material. The theme of change ripples through the cross-platform content, from the zombies to the characters themselves. The world faithfully is brought to life in the 11-series run. I will talk about how the characters adapted to the world and the deviations away from the comics. Season 1 was amazing in a multitude of ways, in kicking off the zombie horror narrative of post-civilization, while today we are being bombarded with an array of zombie content across several mediums. However, in 2010, the zombie content was quite rare. Season 1 adapted from the source material semi-faithfully to the comic book author Robert Kirkman. Season 1 introduced the audience to the group's dynamic, and some extra characters that do not exist in the original comic. AMC added Daryl or Merle onto the mix. The show was an instant success, as within the 6 episodes we grew to care for and connect with the characters, as the audience could resonate with them. The zombie horror genre really sold, and the show was talked about everywhere, inspiring many other zombie type shows and content. AMC in fact made the adaptation of the show slower paced, resulting in that horror aesthetic even more. It worked so well that AMC has employed the same tactic in the hit spin-off Better Call Saul, which is on its 6th and final season, ending the Breaking Bad timeline. But how can a zombie show be adapted for so long? The truth of the success of The Walking Dead is its characters. The change of the show and deviations come from the living, not the dead. AMC's slashed budget forced The Walking Dead's characters to retreat to a farm for the entire season, making the genre of the show more like a character drama than a horror. This season did so much more than just introduce key characters such as Herschel and Maggie that would be pivotal in the show to come. Rick and Shane's established relationship of being the pinnacles of the law in the old and the new world developed with the fight for Laurie and leading the group. The representation of Shane developing into the harsh new world can be argued to be a way quicker transformation that takes place in Rick's arc throughout the show. The adaptation of Shane's death is prolonged this season than the source material. Shane's character, played by John Bernthal, met his demise in the comics the same way in the show, Rick and Carl shooting Shane for threatening the group. Stuart Hall's shared cultural roadmaps changed when the world ended, both former cops not following the same rules they once did. This then impacts the overarching story cross-platform, as one of the bigger deviations in the season is the death of Dale. Kirkman points out in his own words that Dale goes on to have a relationship with Andrea, but in the series, because Shane is still around and Dale is suspicious of Shane, Dale is snuffed out much earlier. This led to fan uproar, but the characters changed drastically because of the death of Dale, also symbolising the death of the patriarchal society that was imposed upon fiery characters like Andrea, but also changed the softer characters such as Sophia's mum. Carol having to deal with the death of not just Dale but her own flesh and blood, in learning that her missing girl that everyone tirelessly searched for until the mid-season finale was close all along in the barn as a walker. Killing Shane and seeing the undead Sophia was a turning point for the group. Now knowing how cruel the new world they inhabit is and dictates their actions, as Rick demonstrates in his
"This isn't a democracy anymore"
speech, they cannot be the same people they were pre-apocalypse. Measures are taken to lessen the leader burden of making the hard choices, as a council is formed when the group settle in the prison. Throughout the show, Rick's leadership decisions are tested. How does the Walking Dead world adapt and expand in multiple platforms? The Walking Dead world cross-platform becomes a worse place as time goes on. The fictional world on display often becomes filled with less and less hope for the future. Even the logo for the show throughout the season decays, like the Fear the Walking Dead titles. This show of change impacts how the characters' representation evolve and adapt. The introduction of the Governor was the start of many similar characters in The Walking Dead story like Negan or the new Commonwealth villain Lance Hornsby, and the continuation of repetitive storylines. The choice that AMC made to not chop Rick's arm off at the end of the prison arc was a big decision, which fundamentally was done for budgeting reasons and hasn't been done since to Rick, but has to Aaron. The living become the bigger threat than the virus. Rick's group proves they have adapted to the apocalypse by fighting the Governor, being hardened by the tough experiences and losing the prison and the farm, as the close family bond and shared trauma glues these characters together to deal with this new world. The World Beyond adapts the comic of the same name with a fresh perspective, having positive representations of their characters, just as The Walking Dead does with Michonne and Fear the Walking Dead does with Morgan transferring shows to become the main character. Leaving The Walking Dead in Season 8 to Fear the Walking Dead Season 4, these representations further the story while pleasing fans. The Walking Dead is its own entity, but the premise of the show is the same throughout, devoid of technology and filled with chaos and flesh-eating zombies. How is The Walking Dead story adapted? The Walking Dead is essentially a tale of world building. The Walking Dead is obsessed with a never-ending narrative. You can see it across the entirety of the show, with the same working formula with the other shows and platforms following suit of survive, look for sanctuary, engage enemy. The never-ending adaptation makes the viewer grow old with the characters.
No kidding.
The representation ideology is changing as we do with them in the post-apocalyptic world. Even in the Telltale The Walking Dead game, Lee Everett goes through this exact pattern, which is adapted from Kirkman's comics as well.
We'll have you all sorted out.
The show goes through the decline of society and the people in it. Even in the Telltale The Walking Dead game, Lee Everett and his surviving group find sanctuary and then engage enemy. They come across a bunch of seemingly nice folks to only discover the worst possible outcome. Having just taken a bite out of their best friend's leg, they were dining with cannibals. Lee does what he knows best. Fights and protects the ones he loves. The subsequent spin-offs never reached the success of The Walking Dead. All shows have fallen for the shock, horror, death mistakes to spike viewership. Even more are coming out now of Tales of the Walking Dead involving an episode of Terry Crews and the Rick Grimes movies of Negan and Daryl spin-offs. The Talking Dead, an aftershow by Chris Hardwick for all the TV shows in the universe, gives back to fans. The Walking Dead universe is big and is just getting bigger, trying to become similar to the MCU. The 6th season represented Rick's group as villains when they invaded the Savior's hideout in the all-out war arc, and for many, killed other than a walker. There was a turning point that remained semi-faithful to the source material, with the finale of not knowing who died to Negan's Bat Lucille. Glenn's death served as a point that changed showrunners due to the drastic decline of viewership in the show. The death of Carl was the death of the future for the show, and after the war arc, Angela Kang adapted the show back to health. The Walking Dead, the last season and season 9, the saving of the show. The fidelity approach is the lifeblood of the contemporary globalization Hollywood film industry. HBO's Game of Thrones' lifeblood was its source material, and when it deviated too far away from its origins, the risk is too great, leaving viewers with a bad taste in their mouth with a quick descent into Fire and Ice in season 8. The end of The Walking Dead, in the comic, dies with Rick Grimes, but with Rick already having left the show. That begs the question, how the writers will adapt the end of the show, if not the death of Rick Grimes. Scott Gimple being removed by fan outcry and replaced with Angela Kang saved the show, even with the biggest deviation from the comics. The departure of Rick Grimes himself allowed his storyline with the Whisperers and the Commonwealth to go to other characters. This was a way to not completely deviate from its source material, as well as giving Carl's plot Judith in the 6-year time jump. Angela Kang nursed the show back to health by having a Western genre setting and achieving a group protagonist instead of just being reliant on Rick Grimes and his plot safety. The Walking Dead had a new life, bigger budget, could adapt into winter seasons with the void of Rick to fill. Characters like Daryl and Negan became a fan favourite. The perk of this deviation is that the budget to adapt settings like winter in the apocalypse, or bigger set pieces like Fear the Walking Dead's radioactive zombies, could be adapted. Adaptation across a few shows makes Rick's disappearance a way to market their other shows like World Beyond, to find out the clues of where Rick is. So, why zombies? The zombie to some resembles mindless creatures in a capitalist society and continually changes, never resting. Moreover, Darabont would make sure the crux of the show would be a character study where zombies are just a backdrop. The change to the dead is something recent fan sites and forums have speculated that zombies will become fast, just like 28 Days Later.
And 28 weeks later.
There are already hints in the spin-off shows of the walkers mutating, which we may see play off in Rick Grimes movies and spin-offs. The individual zombie is only scary for so long. By introducing horde waves of them brought refreshing change into the same world. The introduction of the Whisperers brought back some scare into the world as well. The post-credits scene of World Beyond is fundamentally altering everything, as we see a freshly turned zombie run into a door. The representation of the zombie has evolved and changed along the journey of the plot, just as the characters, hibernating and rotting in The Walking Dead Season 11 episode Anchonon Part 1, and now leaving hints of further mutation. The Walking Dead started off with the patriarchal society. Rick Grimes anchors the story as the pinnacle of law and order, having good violence towards the dead and bad violence against the living. Throughout the show, there are lines you do not cross. As Rick famously says, you are not too far gone. The show plays around with the idea of morality and surviving. These are things that happen in the comic that you absolutely have to put in the show, otherwise you're not doing the comic justice. But maybe we move it up, maybe we move it back. We add different characters into the mix. We just do little adjustments to make it a little more compelling for the audience that is invested in the source material. The Walking Dead is a major success, and there have not been many successful competitive shows that have got a cut of the zombie cash cow. The dependence on the source material lessens over the seasons, but this can be risky as Game of Thrones has demonstrated. Will the show's end feature Rick Grimes? The universe is still getting bigger, with more spin-offs and games. The Walking Dead universe adapts the comic predecessors semi-faithfully while implementing new ideas along the way. Through the Telltale games, comics or other books, I've escaped into the world of The Walking Dead, and having watched the television adaptations, the number of human stories to draw from in this survival apocalypse will be adapted for years to come. The relations between Lee Everett and Clementine or Rick and Carl resonate with the average consumer. Overall, the zombie genre has many repetitive plot lines which run dry, which audience dislike, like the copy of the Negan arc in The Fear of the Walking Dead. Reflecting back, I understand a perfect adaptation cannot exist, and The Walking Dead's fragmented story representation reaches a depth that I will draw from in my storytelling, and the further to make us engage and change with the characters. Thank you for watching.